Well, good afternoon, everybody. We have a shorter song, so it's only 5:02, and it's Wednesday, California time. It's April 17th, 2019. And a funny thing happened to me 6 years ago today. I thought it was 6 years ago Sunday. I celebrated a couple of days early, something that hadn't quite happened yet. But that's what happens when you know things are going to happen. They do. That song that we opened the show with is called Guilty Man. And it was a song that was written by some friends of mine up in Oregon while I was locked up in the Twin Towers for the, second or third time. And it's a story about a guy who grew some plants to help some people and got accused and stood and fought. And then in the end, he was found to be innocent. And of course, this story was my story. But at the same time, when it was going on, I always said, and I say today, it wasn't about my story. It was about what good comes of it. What are we doing with these cases that we stand up and fight? What comes out of it? What changes are we making? And on April 17th, 2014, I walked into court for the, 200 and some time over 6 years. And I expected to set a date for my new trial. The judge was not particularly friendly. He was willing to toss me in jail just before Christmas the year prior to that, because my bail company had decided, because the bail's so high and they could get extra money, that they were going to renew my bond. So for those of you who don't understand bail, when you get given bail, you have two choices. Well, there could be third choice. It could be a property bond, theoretically, but generally you have two choices. One is you pay the amount of bail. Now, if you do, so if you have a small bail and you have some money socked away, say your bail's $10,000, and you put $10,000 down, what that is it's a payment that secures your being out, that says, well, as long as that $10,000 is in our hands, you're going to show up to court because you don't want to lose it. And then when your case is over, you would get that $10,000 back. But most of us don't have $10,000 sitting around. And in my case, I had $250,000 bail because I was a dangerous man. And I was accused of selling plants to sick people. And we can't have that in our society. So I was given a bail that was higher than some people's attempted murder bails and rape bails and breaking and entering bails and all that kind of thing. So most people end up going to a bond company. And what happens there is you have to pay a percentage of that bond, and then the bail company puts up the rest. And generally it's around 10%, or if you know somebody, it might be less. So if you had $100,000 bond, then you would have to come up with $10,000. If you had $10,000 bond, you'd have to come up with $1,000, that sort of thing. So in that case, your money's forfeit. You don't get it because the bond company put up the whole bail. You just put up a little bit. That's how bond companies make their money. So in my case, of course, I had a $250,000 bond and had no money. So we were able to, because of Kathy Z putting up her retirement, and the first time Laura and Kathy put together their savings and their money and got me out. And then the third time, Letitia Pepper's mom put up the money. All those 3 times, that money was never returned. So that's a whole nother scandal that goes on in American court systems. And I think we just passed something in California, and I don't know if it actually passed or if it's still in the works, but they're changing the bail rules. And the other side of it is they do what they call a 1275 hold. And what that says is that even if you had that money, you don't get to necessarily just put it up because it might be illegal money, it might be drug money. So they will force you to prove where that money came from before you can post it as a bond. Well, all of those things happened, and so I walked in to court on April 17th, 2014, on what we call a trial readiness conference. So if you've ever been to court, if you've ever had a trial yourself, you know that you'll go through a series of different elements. You got pre-trial, you got arraignments, you got motion hearings, you got all these different reasons you go to court. And then finally you have what they call a trial readiness conference. And that says you show up at court and say, all right, both sides are ready to go to trial. And then they set a trial date. So it was my understanding that that's what was going to happen. I showed up to court. Like I said, I think I counted, it was over, 200 times total that I ended up going to court for these cases. And I showed up, and there wasn't very many people, because you learn over time that you don't necessarily call for court support for every hearing. When you have 200 of them, you can't expect people to be able to attend that many, because you got to take time off work. It costs you to go to court. Well, your opponents get paid, you have to pay. A little bit lopsided, as you might understand. And hard to get people to take time off of their busy days, especially to go to a place like court. But we did it, and we had a lot of people over the years that would attend. But what we finally did was we said, well, we'll let you know when it's an important day to come. So when I was locked up and I had a hearing, then they bussed me from the Twin Towers over to the court. We tried to have as many people there as we could so that the court could see, and it was powerful. I mean, it made a difference when I was, driving to court in shackles and in the cage inside that caged bus, because I was so damn dangerous. And I saw those people standing out there holding signs, and I smiled and said, "Them's for me." and everybody looked, it made a difference. The guards recognized it. The court recognized it. And I think ultimately it definitely had an impact on the outcome. So we showed up on this day, and we answered ready. And then the prosecutor walks up to the judge and says, "Your Honor, the state has decided to dismiss this case because we had just had ruled in our favor from the appellate court on the previous trial. And it had been now several years. I mean, it had now been 4 years since I was originally charged. And the expense, they'd spent over $4 million on my case already. And they just determined that it wasn't worth pursuing. After all of that hubbub and all of that grief and all of that destruction and devastation to my life, yeah, we're good. We're just going to let it go. So I walked out of there, and of course, in a quite celebratory way. And the next day I was at the Kern River, sitting on a river fishing. But that wasn't the end. And for anybody who has ever faced a case and knows anything about the system, you realize there's more than one kind of court. There's state courts and local courts and family courts and probate courts and federal court. Well, as you know, federal law is much different than state law, and federal law doesn't have any place where you can legally have 3,000 plants, as I was accused of. And in fact, federal law would say that if you were found to have 3,000 plants, you would be facing a mandatory 10 years in prison. And the federal government, as it turns out, has a 5-year statute of limitations. So once the state drops a case, the feds still have 5 years of which to file these same charges on you. Or maybe they make a different case, but they've got 5 years. Well, if you take April 17th, 2014, and you fast forward to April 17th, 2019, you have a span of 5 years. And although I celebrated this on Sunday because I, for whatever reason, forgot and thought it was on the 14th, I reviewed my notes and discovered that it was actually the 17th. And today is the day I can say officially, fuck the feds. I cannot be charged for those crimes. If you want to charge me for something, you got to build a whole new case. I see non-compliant Mary is on the line. Mary, if you're on the line, please, can you screen these calls up? I'm not sure who I got, and I think I recognize my guest, Yvonne. So if it's possible to jump over there and screen these folks. Otherwise, I'm going to guess, and I think I know who it is. But I want to bring up one other story, and this is a story that came up. I'm going to be going to Washington, D.C. in about a month and a bit to go talk to the FDA about CBD. And, you know, it's just a piece of the puzzle, of course, and FDA is looking to regulate CBD and to be, you know, very careful about how we allow these substances into our food supply and all of these things. And the thing that isn't been mentioned is that, as far as we know today, there's no known lethal dose of CBD or THC for that matter. You can eat cannabis oil until it puts you to sleep and makes you throw up, but it won't kill you. And the FDA is the gold standard by which the money people rely on. And if you're not FDA approved, then it's not medicine. You can't call it medicine. You can't claim it's medicine. You can't talk about anything it does for you. I mean, it's a really, and I can understand on one side of it why that would be, but we look at the FDA and doctors. You know, if you ever had a relationship with a doctor, I had a dad who was a doctor, so I grew up with a lot of doctors in my life, and I know how so many of them are. And of course, it's a broad brush to say that they're all like that, but ask a doctor, they'll tell you, you know, they're fucking gods. You know, they think that their shit doesn't stink and that anything that they say is true because they said it no matter what. And how dare you think or challenge anything that they say or do or anything like that. And at the same time, they're a bunch of pussies. And I can understand why, because they spent so much time and money getting that medical license. And I'm not that I don't respect them. I never got a medical license, and I have been around a lot of people that have, and I know that it's quite a feat to do it. And I absolutely applaud their abilities, and you have to be pretty smart, and you have to be pretty focused, and you have to be pretty committed to being a doctor. So I absolutely respect medical professionals. However, that doesn't mean that they're the only ones who know anything. And it doesn't mean that everything that they think is correct is. And I think that if we were honest with ourselves, and I think if we were honest with the community, we might set some other kind of standard for what is okay and what's not. And one of the things that I think we might want to consider would be a thing called relative safety. You know, what about the safety of something? What about that? And why doesn't that count? Why doesn't it matter how safe something is? And it's supposed to, because you do all these trials and you do all these studies and you do all these things in order to prove the safety of something. But you've seen the commercials, you've read the advertisements, you've listened to the stories, you've probably experienced some of the side effects of so-called safe medications. You know, we got two Dee up here. I think one of them is probably not Dee. And by the way, Dee, I love you. Anyways, if you look at just about any pharmaceutical drug, you're going to see possible side effects such as, you know, seizures and skin lesions and impotency and, you know, oily diarrhea and death, you know, a side effect of antidepressants is that you might feel like killing yourself. Very common ones. And the FDA is totally cool with that. And then you come to CBD and THC for that matter, and there's still yet to be a single case of death associated directly because of the consumption of THC or CBD. It is. I was right. All right. So anyways, the point is I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. to try to talk to these people. And I'm looking for some help. You know, I really want to prepare my statement, and I'm looking for points of view, points to make, resources to cite. Doesn't mean send me a bunch of articles. I will not even look at them if you do that. But if you send me some bullet points and the resources that you took the time to study and connect to those points, I'll definitely bring that to bear. Anyways, this came up on the news today, and I want to bring that up before we bring our guest up. Here we go. The Justice Department announced Wednesday that 60 people across 5 states, including more than 30 physicians, were charged in connection with millions of illegal prescription opiates in a takedown by its Appalachian Regional Prescription Opiate Strike Force. 60 medical professions were arrested today for scheming and prescribing. One example they cited was there was a dentist that would actually pull out a tooth that you didn't need pulled out so that he could write you an opiate script. And I can't make this stuff up, folks. Now, this is okay because these are doctors and these opiates are FDA approved. And how dare you question a doctor? But this is what's happening. This is what has happened. And this is what will continue to happen all the way up until the day when we finally say enough's enough. Prohibition needs to end. Let's just end it. Why don't we call a safe substance a safe substance and find some way to treat it that way? And why don't we relook at some of our prescriptions? I would say we should be a little more scrupulous about prescriptions that we allow on the market. I have a friend of mine who came over today, a dear friend of mine, known him for almost 25 years, and he's deformed. He has missing a half of a leg. He's missing fingers, parts of fingers. His mom, when she was pregnant with him, was given a drug called thalidomide. And that was an FDA-approved drug. Turned out it mutated all kinds of people. And then they realized, whoops, I guess we should have studied that one a little bit. Well, we have over 10,000 years of study of the cannabis plant, and there's not a single recorded death directly connected to it. And I just can't think of, and I haven't had anybody ever come up to me with a viable reason why. And yet we just sit there and we bow to these motherfuckers. We bow to them and we tell them, okay, we better just tax and regulate ourselves so you get a bunch of money and the people who are really broke and need the medicine can't have it, because that's what we keep doing. I got one more point before we bring Yvonne up, but Yvonne, you're going to get as much of the show as you need after this. And we'll have plenty of time to talk. That's what I have to say. Another good friend of mine over the weekend, Saturday, came up to me, and he's a supporter of the human solution. But not everybody gets it. Not everybody gets it. And he told me how he was working with one of the legal cannabis dispensary groups, and it was his job to make sure that the illegal shops were being reported to the BCC, the Bureau of Cannabis Control. And I said, what? You're a rat? And he starts telling me about how dangerous these illegal shops are. And I just want to point this out. I get it. I get your moralistic points, and I get the best case scenario of this all. I really do. In the best case scenario, nothing would have poison on it. Neither would the food you eat, neither would the playgrounds your kids play on, and neither would the air you breathe. And I get it. I totally get it. But how dare you stand on your high horse when for the past 30, 40 years, we didn't have any testing. Nobody knew. They were spraying paraquat over the Mexican pot. I remember those days. And did we quarantine it and throw it away? No, we smoked it. And you might have had a coughed up a lung a couple of times, but didn't stop anybody. And still to this day, nobody died from it. And I had somebody cite me a case. Well, you knew somebody who died from moldy pot. Really? I'll bet you if I looked at that medical record, there might have been moldy pot as one of the reasons for this death, but I guarantee there was more going on than that. And we have been ingesting pesticides. What do you think the cancer rates are so damn high right now? We're not going after the pesticides. We're going after the people who didn't follow those little rules and pay all those exorbitant fees and taxes. And ultimately, it boils down to competition. Those people that did don't want those people that didn't to have a seat at the table. And I asked him, I said, so what about the people on fixed income that need oil? Oh, well, or he didn't have an answer for that. So is it okay for a few people to make illegal oil for those people? Didn't have an answer. All right, Yvonne, sorry, we're going to have to go to Craig Cecil, but we're still going to give you all the time you need. Craig's calling from federal prison, and he always gets his 15 minutes.
Right.
But I guarantee you will get the rest of the show.
An inmate at a federal prison. This call is being recorded and is subject to monitoring. Hang up to the...
Craig Cecil, how are you doing today?
Hello, Joe. I'm looking out the window, and it sure looks emblematic of a federal prison.
Oh, geez.
I see a big overhead light with that's turned on. Beyond it is two fences with a whole lot of razor wire on the top and a guard tower. But believe it or not, there's no guard in the guard tower. There's a mannequin.
What?
There's no guard tower out there.
They put a mannequin up in the guard tower.
Yes. For some reason, they didn't want to pay guards to sit in the towers anymore, so they put mannequins in them.
Wow. That's crazy. Nobody catches on that they just don't ever move.
Actually, they did out in Atwater, California. One of the inmates actually crawled over the fence right next to the tower and escaped.
Well, good for him. That's all I can say. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing as well as can be expected. Here in Indiana, where I think we're finally getting into the swing of spring. And granted, there's some rain, but today topped 70 degrees. Tomorrow will be in the low 60s. But we're starting to get away from that winter weather and starting to enjoy the outside again.
Nice. So you're going to be involved in the softball team again this year?
Yes. The field's all set up. We have practices out today. We're going to have pickup games this weekend, and I'm working on putting all the teams and the schedules together this weekend. So, yeah, I'm definitely the commissioner, and it looks like it's going to be a fun year. We got a bunch of new, younger guys in.
Well, I guess good for the team, not so good for those younger guys. But, it's I got to say, though, that's got to be something that really gives you a huge relief to just have something to do to take, that's actually pleasant.
I mean, it gives me a special standing that makes my time a lot easier. Not only does it keep me busy doing something, but it gives me a special standing amongst people here. And it's kind of fun. When it's not frustrating, it's fun, but it's more fun than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's. Oh shoot! What just happened?
Just think about trying to herd together a bunch of disparate people from all over the country. Mind you, these are criminals, so they're not going to be honest. They're not going to be. A lot of them suffer from mental illnesses. A lot of it, believe it or not, just gets to be funny. I mean, you can't help but laugh at the outcome of a lot of things.
Hold on, I'm having a little glitch here. All right, we got it back.
This call is from a federal
So
citizen.
I want to share a thing with you. Today is actually the day that today's the day that the federal statute of limitations runs out on my case.
Can you go to continue?
Oh,
So
today you're officially done, huh?
yeah, they had 5 years. 5 years to file after my state case was up, and today is the 5th. Is 5 year date. It's the day of 5 years officially.
Well, congratulations, you weathered it. Or you've just been more stubborn than they are.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it boils down to. Hang on one second. I gotta enter a pin here.
But especially in light of the recreational marijuana in California, it seems like it would be a lot harder to prosecute marijuana cases out there. I'd have to think anyway.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's the weirdest thing. Oh, there we go. We're back together. It's the weirdest thing. There's all these cases. And the federal government picks and chooses. I mean, in Colorado, they just busted a bunch of people. But today the feds just busted 60 doctors for a conspiracy to write prescriptions for opiates. They had this whole crazy scheme, and I don't think they were all connected in this, but they busted 60 doctors across sort of the Appalachian areas, and they had this one dentist who was actually pulling people's teeth out so that he could write them a script for opiates, even though those teeth did not need to be pulled out.
I mean, you have to think, what kind of person would do that? I mean, is it greed that drives them to that, or and I heard about that story. It involved something like 300,000 prescriptions.
Yeah.
I mean, no wonder the red flags went up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, it's just money, And the thing of it is they've got these doctors who, of course, if you've ever known a doctor, they're gods in their own right, just like judges. And the FDA is the the Lord of all, and yet these are deadly compounds, And these doctors, it wasn't just a couple of doctors, it was a whole ton of them, and nurses and all kinds of medical practitioners, people that, you're supposed to respect and rely on for, sound medical advice. And yet cannabis to this date has never claimed a life, not a single one. And all the hubbub. And, I'm going out to Washington, D.C. on the 31st of May to go talk to the FDA about, the regulations they want to put up on CBDs. And I'm hoping to at least get an opportunity to talk some sense to them. So, it's a gigantic conundrum going on out there. A paradox.
And it doesn't make any sense because, as you point out, opioids that those doctors were involved with. I mean, we've all seen the numbers in the news of how many people die per day, per hour. I mean, it's a sickness that's, just hard to fathom.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, you think about a heroin junkie as kind of the most horrible, lowest form of human when it comes down to it. You think about the guy laying in the street, just, passed out in his own spit and just completely out of it. Right. And yet that's what we're talking about. These are the same kind of drugs that these doctors are just haphazardly, randomly, writing to whoever can pay for them. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom. But then again, they point to the likes of El Chapo and the famous drug dealers to say look how many people died as a result of taking cocaine and whatever else they trash.
Oh, and heroin. Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, and that's exactly the case. It's. I wonder, if we were ever to really get the stats on how many people have died from legal drugs, both in overdoses, in misdiagnosis, in allergic reactions, whatever. If we could get a real number on how many people have died, since medicine had been regulated and controlled by the government.
And our government still has such misdirected drug policy. I just got pulled up a couple of days ago by one of the lieutenants in the corridor.
This call is from a federal prison.
And the lieutenant pointed out that El Chapo is probably going to get the same sentence as me, so we can be fellies together.
Oh, what a nice guy. Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, how can you compare what I'm convicted of and what he's convicted of? There's something wrong with the law that gives us both the same sentence.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in his case, it was a combination of violent crimes and drugs. It's probably the drugs that are getting him the higher sentence, not the violent crimes.
That's unfortunately true. Distributing drugs resulting in death is the actual charge on some of them. Yeah, but I mean, the people that he killed and ordered to be killed, those aren't the ones that are going to get him the life sentence. Right. Now, another piece of news came out yesterday when Attorney General Barr announced that they're not going to offer bail to quite so many of the asylum seekers along the southern border. And in the same vein, he said that, he's looking for a whole lot more, beds to store all these people in. Well, then the rumors started. Right now, the Bureau of Prisons, the prisons are only about 80% full. So there's been a whole bunch of rumors all over the place that maybe they're going to, convert a bunch of federal prisons into, immigration detention facilities.
It wouldn't surprise me. They were talking about dumping them into all the sanctuary cities too. It's a crazy world we're living in. That's for sure.
I do understand that, a lot of people are in bad situations in other countries and all that, but unfortunately, we can't just have open arms as a country saying we're going to make all our people take care of you. And I mean, a lot of these people, because, my husband beat me, my neighborhood was bad for my kids and all that, you got to wonder how many of them Why didn't you fight to save your neighborhood? Why don't we, take on a policy that helps those people fix their own neighborhoods?
Well, and that, starts walking into some waters that are, you get into people's feelings rather than, facts a lot of times. And it's a difficult conversation when somebody's feelings are involved. If you were to actually look at facts about immigration policies and look at other countries in the world and look at ours, we have some of the most lenient policies in the whole world, and we always have. But there's been reasons for it in the past. There was times in our nation's history where we needed a lot of people. We didn't have enough people to do the jobs we needed done. And there's been times in our history where we had enough people. We didn't need more people. So, for a country to have the sovereignty to make its own policies as it sees fit is kind of part of the sovereignty of a country, isn't it?
It is. I mean, we need immigrants. We need the right immigrants, people that are going to come here and assimilate, and they really want to be Americans rather than just escape from where they're at. We want people that want to come here to be Americans. And, of course, they're welcome. We do have room for plenty more people, but they've got to come here to take care of themselves and, to be productive Americans.
Well, it's funny. We kind of veered off of a course, but why not stick with it for a minute? Some of the people that I've found that get the most angry about immigration problems are the people who are immigrants. Sorry, that's my dogs going crazy out there. They end up liking to, start an orchestra. Anyways, some of the people that I've come upon in my life that have been the most upset about immigration policies are those immigrants that came over here and did it legally. And these are people that are upset at people from their own country because they went through all this trouble and all this hassle, and they respected the idea of U.S. citizenship to the point where, they became one. And then they see all these other folks that are basically just taking the same rights without having to do anything for them. And I've had all kinds of immigrants, not just Mexican immigrants, but from many other countries that, frankly, feel very strongly about it as well.
I agree. It's really an uphill fight because, like you say, on one hand we need immigrants, but on the other hand we need the right immigrants. And how do you separate those two?
Well, it would take an effort and some common sense, which might be part of the problem. Those things are kind of hard to come by in this place. Well, there's your first beat, Craig. I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor to finish your thoughts.
Well, as you know, our Congress hasn't been real productive here lately in terms of getting a lot of legislation passed and really moving forward on, immigration and healthcare and all that. But let's get them to look at drugs. Let's get them to look at, how are we treating marijuana? Why am I getting El Chapo? Why do our laws do that? Why do we put so many people in prison for drug offenses for sentences 3 to 4 times as long as people in prison for violent crimes? Let's redirect our criminal justice system to really protect people from harm rather than harming people by putting in, people that, deal with marijuana or that in the prison and never hurt anybody.
I couldn't agree with you more. And, well, there he goes, 15 minutes. Well, the good news is at least, if you don't know, Craig is the commissioner of his softball league. And once a year, or at least, as of last year, he gets a little bit of a respite. He gets to have something outside of the nightmare of prison to deal with. So it's good that he's got at least something to keep his mind, off of the nightmare that might be if you were to consider what it would be like to have a life sentence in federal prison for pot. And I'm going to make one final point before I turn it over to Yvonne. I've been looking forward to continuing our conversation. And it's this. I've been allegedly involved in cannabis cultivation and production of medicines and wheeling and dealing and this and that and all these things that were 100% illegal back in the 80s when I began, or allegedly, and has run through various different courses and cases of legalities. I was ruled by one judge in Riverside County in 2010 that I was found to be compliant of all California laws, and my case was to be dismissed and all my property was to be returned, and it was. And 5 weeks later, I was raided and charged with a whole bunch of other things. And 5 years later, that case was dismissed. And 5 years later, the feds have finished their statute of limits. But at the end of the day, I've kept doing what I'm doing because it's the right thing to do. I believe in what I do. And it bothers me a lot that now that so many people believe that we are okay, we're legal, it's over. I get people approach me on business ventures and proposed partnerships and every kind of thing every single day. And yet none of those people want to help finish the job. I got people who call themselves activists and they got some side venture going on and that's all they spend their time on now. And I'm still looking to finish the job, and I'm looking for people that realize that until we create a world where you can't get locked up for this plant, no matter what, you just can't, because it's not a crime anymore. That until we do that, there's still going to be Craig Cecils out there. There's still going to be people that are victimized by a bad system. There's going to be still laws in place that should be broken. And we've talked about that endlessly. I know so many people that have been put in a spot where they have to make a decision between following the law and saving the life of a loved one. And plenty of them get stuck and they end up moving. They pack up and move because they're not willing to break the goddamn law. And it hurts my heart because I know what hardships people have gone through packing up their whole families and moving to a place where they feel safe. And even in those places, people are getting locked up. And people are ratting on each other because you didn't sign this paper and you didn't pay this fee and blip, blap, bloop, whatever it is. Why don't we end prohibition? Why don't we repeal the Controlled Substances Act or revise it? It would just be that easy. Just make it not illegal anymore. Yeah, I know. All the money that we could make. There's lots of ways to make money, folks. All right. We're going to get on to Yvonne. We're going to just jump right back in and continue our conversation. Yvonne, I apologize for taking so long to get to you, but I can assure you we will have all the time we need to complete this conversation. And how are you doing today? Whoa, I got to... You know what? I have my speaker is sounding really low. Hang on a second. I'm going to try it. There we go. All right. I had my other phone is working. The speaker didn't work on the other one. All right. We're good. So yeah, we have a lot of interesting conversations on this show, and you know, it drives me nuts because people really just don't get it. They just don't get it. They think that a law got passed in your state and everything's good. And so in those states where these laws get passed, people are still getting locked up. What happens is as I've talked about in California especially, but I know it's happened in Colorado and Washington and you know, the handful of stores, and I'll just call them what they are. They're stores that jump through the legal hoops and they get their paperwork legit, they go and they rat on all the people that didn't. And at the end of the day, and this is my biggest beef, this is really what it all boils down to. People that need cannabis medicine oftentimes are on fixed incomes. And they can't afford the prices that these licensed places charge. And so we don't have an answer. All of the, tax and regulate stuff, it literally removes from the equation most of the people that need the medicine the most.
My solution is do what you need to do anyway. Keep your head down. Don't get caught because you're not a criminal until they catch you.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I have walked both sides of the fence for a long time, and I think that there's two parts to that, though. That's the first part, is break the bad laws because they're bad laws. But the second part is, we have the power. We're the jurors. Okay? We don't have paid, or we have paid jurors, but we don't have people that get to select who gets to be a juror. And if we educate people about their right and their power to nullify a bad law when they see it and when they hear it and when they see a law is unjust or immoral, they have a right and an obligation to vote not guilty if somebody's being charged with a crime. And if we could educate people to that note, I think that, and at the same time, if we could get people to have the courage that if they get busted, of course we don't want you to get busted, and certainly don't go out of your way to get busted. But if it happens, stand up and fight. Stand up and fight, because you don't have a chance to win unless you do. And then we got to teach the people that, look, when you... Go ahead.
One of our Tennessee very strong activists here in Tennessee, Melanie Cash, and she stood up and fought them. It wasn't, a huge charge. She only had, just a few grams in Tennessee, a few grams, and a pipe or roach clip or anything that we consider paraphernalia is going to bind you in a big bunch of fines or in a federal prison. But she fought it, and she beat her case. And a good thing that activists can do, and it's what we try to do in Tennessee, is if you know somebody's going to be in court, do everything you can do to get you not a cheering section, they'll throw you all out, but have a big presence in support of, whoever is in court fighting. And that's something else that we've been trying to do in Tennessee.
Well, the human solution...
He's not going to get anything until it's federal. I mean, that's just how it is. We had a really incredibly weak, very limited medical cannabis bill, and it didn't even pass the full committee. So, and we're not a ballot initiative state. So, it's people, especially in states like us who don't have a ballot initiative. It is our lawmakers, it's our legislators who make these laws. But these stupid people keep voting in the same legislators who are prohibitionists. And lately now, I'll just tell them, you knew how these politicians stood on cannabis before you voted for them in this election. And, cannabis may or may not be your prime issue that you look at. But if it's not your prime issue and you elect the prohibitionists anyway and you vote against your cannabis interests, don't complain. Because you voted them in and you knew what you don't pick up a snake. You see a snake on the ground, you know it's liable to bite you. Don't pick it up. But people do when they vote.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I have a congressman that's been seated since I've lived out here over 20 years, and he's horrible. And every election cycle, I see his signs go up, and I see a couple of people, run against him. And every year they keep voting him back in, and he's not a friend of ours on any level. And it's endlessly frustrating, to see the lack of attention people spend when they cast their ballots. The other thing is judges. Many judges seats are elected, and we keep voting these judges without knowing anything about their record and the things that they, judges legislate from the bench, whether you believe it or not, whether you like it or not, they do. And there are judges that are lenient on nonviolent drug crimes, and there's judges that are, mandatory every time on nonviolent drug crimes, and it goes on from there. But you watch the same judges, the incumbents always win. You get in once, generally you're appointed in, and then you just stay in. Very seldom is a judge ever unseated, once in a great while. Well, I want to talk about your campaign, because last year you ran for governor of Tennessee, and that's really an amazing feat. Based on your experience and your life experience going into this. Are you legally blind at this time? I know we said that you.
I am totally blind, and I lost all of my sight when I was 29. And then in 2005, I had to have both of my eyes removed because they were deteriorating. And I had to be on that horrible fentanyl patch, because that's the only thing that would touch my pain. And I couldn't smoke at the time because I just graduated college, and I knew I was going to probably be drug tested to, get a job. And I thought, at the time I would be fine, but that's the worst thing. That's one of the worst things that's ever happened to me. I'm sitting here, my heart's sitting here racing now, just thinking about just how horrible it was. And then I ended up getting a job after I'd gone through the withdrawals and stepped myself down with my doctor's help. I got lucky. I had a doctor. We knew going into taking the fentanyl I was going to have problems, but we also knew that working together, a good doctor-patient relationship, and she let me help my own, step down process on it. But then after I got my job, it was at the university hosting a radio show, and I asked the president of the university, I said, so are you going to drug test me? And he's like, no. And I'm like, wow, I wish I'd have known about it.
Oh, man.
Taking all that fentanyl and everything.
Wow. So
running for governor, I took a page out of Jack Hearer's book, and my entire campaign was solely cannabis. You talk about economics, I talk about cannabis. You talk about crime, I would talk about cannabis. You ask a question about health, I would talk about cannabis. In one of the forums I attended, the question was, well, what do you see as our three worst problems in Tennessee? I said, well, you know what? Let's just change that around a bit. Let's don't talk about what the problems are. Let's talk about this one solution that could make a lot of headway and open a lot of roads into these issues like economics and health, education, social, civil justice, the entire everything could possibly come down to cannabis.
And how was that received when you were having these conversations? How did you feel that the community received you?
Oh, community received it very well. In Tennessee, we've had unofficial polls done by our local, all of our local TV stations, but we've also had 2 scientific polls done through Vanderbilt University and then another Middle Tennessee State University that polled a good 80%, and now it's even higher, who would approve and would want medical cannabis, and legal cannabis for all adult use. They called it recreational. I avoid that. I just like the term adult use. Was at least 60% in these scientific polls, and these legislators are not listening to their constituents. They're listening to our law enforcement.
Yeah, and that's for sure.
Tennessee.
So what was your opposition like? And what was it like running?
We didn't have a lot of opposition being an independent candidate. We had an interesting gubernatorial election last year. We had a Republican, a Democrat, and 27 independent candidates.
Wow.
Because they were saying, the election commission and the Secretary of State was saying, well, if y'all run independents, that's just going to be make a more difficult ballot. So we just wanted to show them how difficult it was, since they kept denying third parties ballot access in Tennessee. So we ran 27, there were 27 independent candidates, and there was a group of us that ran kind of together, and we, helped each other out. We called ourselves the Tennessee 20. But my political aspirations started farther back than that. They started back in strongly around 2013, when I got heavily involved with cannabis activism work. And I knew we needed somebody at some level, whether we knew I wasn't going to win governor. Let's just, call it like it is. But I set out to make a statement. I set out to put cannabis into the political conversation in a big way.
And I think that's a noble act. I think that one of the things that troubles me a lot is that our actual contending candidates don't ever share their opinion about this. They always sidestep it and skirt it. And every time, it even gets brought up, generally they don't even let it get brought up. But that discussion just really doesn't happen, with Congress, with governors' elections, with and especially not the president. But I mean, you would expect this is a pretty substantial issue. They say more than 60% of Americans have some opinion about this that's favorable on some side or another. And yet, when was the last time you saw in a mainstream, debate, discussion, town hall meeting, or whatever, that a contending candidate really lays down his opinions about this?
Well, in the primaries in 2016, during the primaries, anytime they would ask a question and Bernie Sanders would start to speak, I'm like, say it, just say cannabis, say the word, just say it one time. And he even avoided it.
Yep. I
mean,
agree.
He mentioned it a couple times, but there
Barely.
were so many myths.
Barely.
Of the 10 seconds.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think that's part of the problem. And I think that we as the people need to be a little more, I don't know, we certainly need to be a little bit more clear about what we want. I think we also need to be a little bit more creative. We have all of these media outlets and media platforms to work from, and I think that the political landscape is starting to, but really needs to change. You know, you got a president that's living on Twitter, for God's sake. You know, I mean, we have you know.
Here.
Say again.
Here's something, all of you, all of the listeners. Here's something you can do. Okay, President Trump, and he loves Twitter. We all know this. So let's use that. Have everybody, you know how you can do the the real Donald Trump or whatever his name is on Twitter, and make a statement. Say something to the effect of, hey, if cannabis were federally legal now, if you would do something with, your cabinets and get cannabis legal before the primary debates begin, then you will take cannabis off of the table for the Democrats. Because the Democrats are already showing they are going to, cannabis is going to be one of the bigger topics in the debates in 2020 than it has been in the past. And the Trump administration, if they were really smart, they could take it off the table for the Democrats just by either a nationwide decriminalization effort or a nationwide legalization. Take it off the table. Or get the stupid, get it out of Schedule 1, Anything positive that this administration could do in the near future. I hate to say it, but it would help them because it would, like I said, take it off the table for the Democrats.
Oh, I totally agree. Well, listen, what do you think?
That's strategy.
I agree. I totally agree. But that would involve some common sense, and there doesn't seem to be much of that anywhere in politics. So tell me, Yvonne, where are you at now? What's your next moves? What are you thinking about? Let's just take you to the place where you're creating your future. What does it look like? What are you planning on doing next?
I think in Tennessee, what I would like to do next is work to create a CannaPAC, a cannabis-centered political action committee, because you can have candidates all day say, okay, get me elected, help me get elected, and I will do what I can do to forward cannabis legalization, blah, blah, blah. But what a PAC would do, if you, as a PAC, give money to a candidate, because that's, people listen to that. If you give money to a candidate and they win and they do not fulfill their promise to this PAC, then you have the option saying, well, look at this. We gave you money and look what you did. And people, the general public, will pick up on that, and then the chances of this candidate winning re-election is slimmer than it was. And plus, if you work as a whole together, if the entire Tennessee cannabis community would work together, maybe we could get some better voices in our legislature. But I think federal is where a lot of focus needs, in Tennessee especially, the activists need to just say, screw you, Tennessee General Assembly, I'm going to work on federal legislation. It's just, they've got Tennesseans begging for crumbs and kissing ass here. And with the limited Republican, I call it the limited conditions, low THC, oil only political cannabis bill. That's all we have.
Yeah, that's in my opinion what we call worthless
And I
out
just went
here.
to a CBD store today, and the oils and tinctures and everything, the non-smokables, that stuff's expensive.
Yep, it's true. And at the end of the day, that's the price of prohibition. The people that are out there trying to make it, they're facing huge risks, even though, with CBD that supposedly you don't have the same risk. But I had a package seized in Canada just the other day, and the Canadian government took it and sent me back a letter saying, sorry, we're keeping it. You can't have it back. And I also know of CBD shops that have been raided. You got DEA or FDA, threatening all kinds of things. And at the end of the day, you got Carl's Jr. getting ready to put out a CBD burger in Colorado.
Right.
So it's just a whole bunch of mixed up, nonsensical things happening all at once. And the one thing that would make sense of it is if we all just said, you know what, enough's enough, and we just need to end this. And that's where I stand. And I don't know if you know, but when you were talking about bringing people together in court, the Human Solution International, the organization that I'm CEO of and that this show is based on, that's a big part of what we do. Court support is we teach people how to do it. We have guidelines. We have solidarity ribbons that we make for everybody to wear. We have really a whole plan on how to show support, how to do a civil protest, how to rally if you need to, and not do damage to the defendant, but rather be supportive. I went through a case that lasted 6 years, and if it wasn't for the supporters in my trial, I'd probably just be getting out of prison right now. And instead, I'm a free man, and I have no criminal record, in no small part because of all the supporters. So I would absolutely want to welcome you to participate with the work that we're doing. I would love to engage some of the stuff. Now, we're a 501c3, so we couldn't directly be part of a PAC, but I do think that that's a good idea. And so to further that conversation, do you have a plan laid out to set this PAC up, or what's your thoughts on that?
No, we're just now getting people interested enough to get a small group together to get this actually started. A friend of mine and I, he's been on the 2 different board of directors with me for cannabis reform, and it's something that he and I have been trying to work on, and now I think is more than time to, we're going to give it a one really hard push and see if we can't really get something like this started. We have a really strong, in Tennessee, it's gaining ground, a really good libertarian party here in Tennessee, and cannabis legalization, or all things cannabis, is at the forefront of what the Tennessee Libertarian Party hopes to see happen in Tennessee. That, along with, again, I stress again, fair ballot access is a lot to do with it, because the Green Party and the Libertarian Party, we've been all about cannabis legalization since both parties have formed. We don't sit here, well, we're for medical, but we've got questions about recreational, blah, 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 freaking blah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that, I could take an argument on anything and say that all use is medical, if that's your point of view. But meanwhile, I do think that this is a freedom issue, and it's really not about any of that. It's about, this is a plant, a substance that has never killed anybody, and how dare the government think that it had the right to tell us that we can't have it. And that's all. It really shouldn't be more than that. And that's where,
and they're going on all of the propaganda from Harry Enslinger. May he not rest in peace. I'm sorry, but that man's a horrible criminal.
May he rot in hell. I guess that's
and
bad.
they're still banking on all the things that were like reefer madness. That's what the legislators and our law enforcement and the FDA are trying to convince people. And it's not harmful. It was not based on science. Prohibition has nothing to do with science. And I called out the legislators last year. I sent all of them emails, and I referenced Harry Anslinger, and one of his statements was, it will make darkies think they're as good as we are. It'll make our white women want to have sex with, and then it named off a whole list of minorities and entertainers.
Yikes.
And I'm like, so, you think darkies think they're going to be as good as everybody else if you legalize? Is this what you think?
Wow, that's crazy. Well, listen, I do definitely want to extend my hand in cooperation, and I would like to maybe find some way that we can work together. My organization has a few.
You got my number. Give me a call one day.
I will, absolutely. And we have a twice a week conference call that the executive team has, and we bring in other people sometimes. So I'm going to give you a call probably tomorrow, and we'll set up maybe to call in Tuesday. We do a call at noon Pacific time, so it'd be, I don't know, are you Eastern time or Central?
I'm on Eastern.
Okay, so it'd be 3:00 Tuesday. Are you good with that? 3:00 Tuesday?
Yeah.
Excellent. I'll call you up tomorrow, and I'll give you the. Yeah. I'm just getting your number down again.
It's been great talking to you.
Well, I very much appreciate it, and I really, we have a chapter sort of in Tennessee. It's actually a 4-state chapter called Southern Style, and it covers Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, and we've had some activity over the years, but in the last few years it's been kind of quiet. So it's hard. It's been, my experience, it's been difficult to get people to stand together. We work together with Peachtree Normal and Sharon Ravert and some of the other folks over there. We absolutely have worked with them and would continue to. We consider them to be, allies in the field. But I really,
you probably know Kim Smith then.
Yeah, Kim Smith was my chapter coordinator for the Southern Style chapter. So
Kim came from Tennessee.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know
Very proud of the work she's done.
Yeah, Kim's great, and I met her at the Netroots Nation conference a couple years ago. Her and Sharon and some of the other folks from the Peachtree Normal. So there's a bunch of people that are out there trying to do stuff. I just think that if we put our heads together, we could come up with one unified plan and get enough people together, and we have support from all around the country through our organization that we could bring to bear and help shed light on this. So I absolutely will reach out to you tomorrow, and let's keep this thing going.
Everybody have a happy 420 weekend.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Yvonne Forsyth, and I expect that we'll be hearing more from her, and I can see an alliance getting ready to form. So thank you so much, Yvonne. You have a fantastic evening. We'll talk tomorrow.
You too, Joe. Thank you.
All righty. All right. So we got Tom Corby to wrap up the show today, and let's see what Tom has to say. Tom Corby, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Joe. Lisa, Becca, always and all those great speakers today. Another historical show. It could be both historical show. I really feel we have the momentum to find the end prohibition that could help these politicians get the message. Don and I want to thank you all again. Great man here without him. Don had a they got her on heart meds. She's doing really good now. They're $500 a month.
Yikes.
On farm. Exorbitant. So we're working straight to get CalMed and maybe put the price down on it and for everybody's sake. And of course, we're taking your products, Joe. We want to thank you. The oils you help us so much. God is back home and doing pretty good. She's improving daily.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I want to thank you all again for everything.
All right, Tom. Well, you hang tough. Say again? No, I said you hang tough, and I heard Donna's back, and man, we gotta get her on the other side of this mess.
Yeah. You want to say today? Hi, everybody on Stop Party Radio Show. The reason we don't have a lot of we're not very adamant of brevity is because we've got them down in Utah County in Northern California. This is a precedent. So you can use these precedents as a case law with your case. And always get your discovery. So that 995 dismissed probable cause. Well, I could put that on one motion. This is probable cause almost happen every time. Okay, I want to thank everybody today and all those coming together, praying, volunteering to be this person to find the end prohibition. For all our POWs, no one should go to jail for a plan. Thank you all today. Bring Willie in.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tom. And next week, I believe we're going to have a guest who's going to tell us why this plant needs to be regulated. And he was supposed to come on last week, or not last week, several months ago, and he somehow didn't make it. But apparently he's going to this time. So tune in next week where I get to finally talk to somebody who thinks that this plant needs to be regulated. All right, till then, let's see what Willie has to say.
Party and I endorse the human solution, supporting cannabis prisoners because no one should go to jail for a plant. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.